Ladies and gentlemen, we all know what happened at Ruby Ridge. Or at least I think we all know. There may be somebody out here who doesn't. Randy Weaver and his family were approached by an agent of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and was actually an informant, was sold a shotgun that was about 1/4 of an inch too short for the legal limit. 1/4 of an inch, folks. These socialist puke-faced scum kill people over 1/4 of an inch. Can you believe that? Don't ever stand next to one of them at the urinal. Randy Weaver was then approached by another agent who then bought that same shotgun from him. And then they arrested Randy Weaver. Randy had a son, 2 daughters, and a baby on the way. Or actually, at that time, the baby wasn't on the way yet. And they told Randy they were going to put him away forever unless he agreed. See, this was all a setup just to get somebody to spy on other people. Unless he agreed to spy on his neighbors and people that he knew. Randy, being a good person, said, "No, I will not do this." So he was sent home on his own recognizance and told to come back on a court date. And they said they were going to lock him up forever. Would you come back after they told you that? After they set you up, arrested you, told you you're going to jail forever, or you got to rat on your friends for 1/4 of an inch of a barrel that Randy probably didn't even measure, probably didn't even know that it was short. Most people can't tell the difference between 16 inches and 15 3/4 inches just by looking at it. Nor would they even guess to do it. Now, if it obviously looks short, sure. Everybody would say, "Whoa, wait a minute, I don't want to get involved in that." But 1/4 of an inch, folks. And then they told him when he said, "No, we're going to put you away forever," and they actually expected him to come back. I wouldn't have come back either. So Randy took his family and headed to Idaho, where there are people who think like he thinks. It doesn't matter what you think about what he thinks, as long as he doesn't injure the person or property of any other human being in this world. He's entitled to think whatever he wants to think and worship at whatever altar he wants to. Well, it took them a while, but they finally found him. And they sent a team of marshals up there who were surprised by the dogs. And Randy and his son, hearing the dogs barking, thought maybe there was a deer on their property and they wanted to put some meat in the larder. So Randy and his son and their friend, Kevin, grabbed their rifles and went running out the door. Randy went up on the road. His son and his friend went down a path into the forest and ran straight into a U.S. Marshal's ambush. First thing they did was shoot and kill the boy's dog. The boy turned and started to run, and they shot him dead in the back. In the back. Killed him dead. 14-year-old boy. The other boy ran up to the cabin, and Randy Weaver ran up to the cabin, and his friend told him that his son was dead. And then the siege began. Over 500 federal agents, military personnel, BATF, FBI, local law enforcement, tanks, armored personnel carriers, and helicopters surrounding Randy Weaver, his dead son, his wife, 2 daughters, and an 8-month-old baby. What was that all about? Before it was over, one of the most despicable creatures that's ever crawled upon this earth, an FBI sniper by the name of Lon Horiuchi, murdered Vicki Weaver as she stood in the door of the cabin, holding her baby in her arms to her breast, shot her in the head and killed her. She fell back into the cabin, still clutching her baby in a death grip, and died in a great pool of blood that spread over the floor of the cabin in front of her two daughters, her husband, and their friend, another boy. This happened when Randy and his friend Kevin went out to the birthing shed where they had his son laid out to prepare him for burial. Randy Weaver was shot. His friend was shot, both wounded. His son and his wife dead. And they prepared to stay in that cabin and be murdered by the police state. Luckily, a couple of reporters walking through the forest where they weren't supposed to be stumbled upon a clearing where a helicopter was attaching a rubber bladder full of fuel by cable to the underside. They were going to drop it on the cabin and burn Randy Weaver and his family just like they did the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. But that was to come later. When they saw the reporters watching them, they stopped, disconnected the fuel bladder, and aborted that mission, thank God. Eventually, Randy Weaver and the family members who were alive came out. A man by the name of Lieutenant Colonel James Bogreitz claims a lot of credit for that, but you don't know what I know about that. See, he claims he went to help Randy Weaver. That is not true. He was called by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He was working for them. He was wearing a wire the entire time, recording every conversation that he had with Randy Weaver. I don't know if Jack McLam knew about that or not. But I can tell you that's a fact. We also have on tape around here somewhere that Lieutenant Colonel James Bogreitz at one of his lectures in California, and we have it on tape in his own voice, admitted that he has been a federal informant since he was the age of 18 years old. And one of these nights I'll play that tape for you. Randy Weaver was tried and found innocent, ladies and gentlemen. Innocent. Now, what does a man like that do? His wife is dead. His son is dead. His friend was wounded. He was wounded. The communist news networks and the socialist Marxist scum journalists across this country have vilified him every chance that they got, and he was guilty of nothing. They found him innocent. He had committed no crime from the beginning. The only thing that they found him guilty of was he didn't show up at court when he was supposed to. But yet they found him innocent of the crime he was supposed to show up for. The federal government has gone off the deep end, and a lot of local law enforcement agencies have followed them. And it's going to stop. And then came a whole lot of other incidents that most of you don't know about and probably never will, and there really isn't time to go through them all. But then the big one came, Waco, Texas. And everything they said about what they did in Waco, Texas was a lie. From the beginning to the end, and even to this day, they are lying.
I want to thank you all for coming out here. You're really at the wrong spot. You should be down at the IRS Commissioner's office and asking him why all of this is going on. Ask him to show you the law that requires you to pay this federal income tax. He won't be able to do it. The closest thing he'll come to is to say, well, you have to pay it because we've shown that through the courts. They say you have to. When you have a government that enforces non-law passed by your Congress, you're run by a king, and it usually ends up very tyrannical. Where are we at now? George Bush says he don't care what Congress says. He's the king. He's the president. He's going to do what he wants. George Bush does not represent me at all. He's a criminal. What he is, he should be indicted for war crimes. My grandpa Harvey Weaver one time said government just like a garden. It needs to be weeded every now and then. You want to know why he said that? I didn't know for a while, but I've figured it out since. This lady here was my wife of almost 20 years. She was a very intelligent lady. The best mother I knew, the best wife I knew. Homeschooled her children. And when my oldest daughter, one example, I won't go through all of them. One example, my oldest daughter, she taught her through the 8th grade. When I went to jail and they sent my daughters back to Iowa, they put Sarah in the 11th grade in high school. She hadn't been to school for a couple of years, so we thought she was done. Went into 11th grade and graduated with 3 scholarships. The other kids were just as good. I'm not going to go through all that. Very sweet lady, and when they shot her, she was holding, now this baby here was that was my oldest daughter. That's a picture of my wife holding my oldest daughter, Sarah, who is now 31. But she was holding my youngest daughter, Elizabeth, just about the same way. When they shot my wife through the head, Elizabeth was right here. And when I picked her up from underneath my wife's body, she had jawbone, glass from the window pane, and blood all over. I thought she was wounded or dying too. That's one reason we need to weed the government now and then, because they take orders to enforce non-laws. These people are here under non-laws, and we were too. I was originally on a gun law, but the U.S. Marshals were up there to get me on a failure to appear. I got paperwork I can show you. I had the wrong court date. By the time they claimed I was a wild crazy man up in the mountains and the U.S. Marshals going to come get their man, that's the last straw. I got mad. And my wife is mad and my kids are standing behind me. And we said, this is it, we ain't going to deal with you no more. What makes people willing to put their lives on the line? They'll take so much BS from the so-called government, the de facto government, and then they just say back off. And this is just what's happening right here. I ain't afraid of dying no more. I'm kind of curious about the next life, and I'm an atheist. My son Sam, this picture, he was 11 years old. He died 3 years later. U.S. Marshals shot his dog, a yellow Labrador, when the dog was running home. They autopsied the dog, which the U.S. Marshals didn't realize they would do. They wouldn't mess with the dog there. His story was the dog was attacking him. Well, apparently in North Idaho, yellow Labradors, they attacked running backwards because he was shot right up the rear end to come out his spine here and went through his right ear. He was running up the road toward home. He'd already passed these goons. But their job that day on our property was to kill this dog because he had a big mouth, kind of like me, I guess. And they wanted to silence him. Sam said, "You shot Stryker, you SOB." I'll give you the exact words. Well, I'm going to abbreviate it. And he fired 2 rounds in this undercover camouflage U.S. Marshal's direction that he just saw shoot his dog, and he turned to run for home. Another Marshal who's from Boston, Mass., not too far from here, he shot this little fella in the right arm, about blew his arm off the elbow. Sam yelled, "Oh shit." Now I'm telling you what my friend Kevin Harris and his stepbrother, he was there to witness this. He said, "Sam yelled, 'Oh shit.'" Come on, Kevin. The U.S. Marshals were shooting at Kevin at the same time. Sam had shot these 2 rounds at U.S. Marshals. Kevin fired 3 in their direction while he was being shot at. So there's 5 rounds fired between my sons. They fired a total of 14 rounds. They didn't hit Kevin, but Kevin heard it when they hit Sam in the back. It was like, he said, it sounded like when somebody punches in the back real hard, takes the wind out of you. Well, later on, it had blown his heart right out. When I picked him up off the ground dead, chunks of meat was falling out of his mouth. His little eyeballs was halfway open and rolled back, and the whites, you don't forget that stuff. After they shot Sam, a U.S. Marshal was shot and killed, and I honestly believe in my heart, they have never proved otherwise, it was friendly fire. They can't admit that. They won't admit that. That's even, think how much worse that is than blaming it on one of us. They blamed his death on my stepson. Said my stepson did it. Well, he'd come out in court. He didn't do it. They even showed one of his men's, they showed his backpack, and it had one bullet hole going through it sideways, and proved that that came from that silent submachine gun from the guy behind him who was supposed to have killed the dog with that to start with when we weren't present.
In the mountains up near Sandpoint, north of Naples, Idaho, eagles gathered there together to guard the truth, so you might know. Down the road that followed Deep Creek, at the turn that crossed the bridge, federal marshals had the roadblock to mark the siege of Ruby Ridge. There the armies of the enemy slayed your bride and only son, nearly killed your close companion when the shrapnel pierced his lung. We stand with you, Randy Weaver, 'cause your Lord and Savior lives. Wheresoever eagles gather, that is where his body is. On that evening, late one August, you were forced to take your stand. There 2 strangers as they trespassed drew first blood on private land. Governor Andrus back in Boise let the enemy tell him lies, and from his anti-Christ decision, Sam and Vicky lost their lives. Federal agents, U.S. Marshals, and FBI men stormed the hill, all on false, fictitious charges, given orders shoot to kill. We stand with you, Randy Weaver, 'cause your Lord and Savior lives. Wheresoever eagles gather, that is where his body is. Though the armies of the enemy may surround us in the night, there's a host of heavenly angels hovering near, ready to fight. We stand with you, Randy Weaver. We are proud to call you friend. As we gather here together, stand beside you till the end. We stand with you, Randy Weaver, 'cause your Lord and Savior lives. Wheresoever eagles gather, that is where his body is. Wheresoever eagles gather, that is where his body is.
Even showed one of his men's. They showed his backpack, and it had one bullet hole going through it sideways, and proved that that came from that silent submachine gun from the guy behind him who was supposed to have killed the dog with that to start with when we weren't present. This is why I'm here, because if this gets out of control, this is going to happen here. It's happened many times throughout history. Right in this country, you don't hear about it most of the time. I'd rather die on my feet right here with the people like this, good American people, than live on my knees anymore under this de facto government that'll lie to you, steal from you, murder you, make you commit suicide. This is serious stuff. Bring it on. Yes, sir.
Randy, sort of two-part question. Do you think this situation is really the same thing as what happened at Moving Ridge? The first part. The second part of the question is, what advice are you giving the Browns?
Real similar situation. Conviction of a non-law. There's different parts of it. I had a failure to appear deal. That was another part of the story. But these people have been convicted of a non-law. It's like he said, the judge appealed for him. Why would he do that? I say it's a trick to get him back in court where they ain't going to let him go this time. They ain't going to release him because he's failed to appear once or whatever. I don't know what it is, but they were in court. They were railroaded. You know, these judges, have you ever heard of anyone going to prison unlawfully? The prosecutor and the judge knew the guy was innocent and they stuck him there anyway? What the hell's wrong with these people? Where's their heart?
What advice, if any, have you given the Browns?
The Browns here are smart enough to figure their own thing out, and they already have. I'm not going to tell them they should do this, they shouldn't do that. I know the situation they're in now and where they're at mentally, and I support them 100%. And you know, after you get so angry, you overcome your fear, and that's where we're at here, I guess. But we're, being an atheist, I'm praying for a miracle that some common sense will prevail. And I hope the American people can see how they have been buffaloed and stomped in the dirt. And these people that do this and enforce it, the IRS, you see, they'll say you have to do this. Oh, he didn't do it, so what do? They don't come out and enforce it. No, they take their U.S. Marshals, go get these guys, and these U.S. Marshals, they'll do it because they're paid pretty good money, and they don't understand that really these people are in the right, and the IRS is in the wrong. And you know what? The IRS, if they get thrown under the bus and killed like Deegan up there at Ruby Ridge, they don't care. They just replace him with another one.
What do you think it is would lead the situation to escalate to the point that you fear? Would it be impatient upon the government's part?
It's strictly self-defense from this side, honey.
from the offensive part, what do you think it is that would push them to the point that you fear?
What would push them to the point that we would fear? If
As of now, they're there.
I don't fear anything right now. I don't fear them. I'm not afraid, honey. I'm actually curious about the next life. You see, I don't pay my tithe to the church because I don't believe in Jesus either. And I ain't paying my tithe to the U.S. government because I ain't afraid of them either. We'll put it that way. You see, governments and religion go hand in hand. They always have throughout history. Religion was invented to control the masses, and they go like this to the government. You know, to a religious person, they say religion is necessary. To the non-religious atheist, I say it's useless. To the king, he says it's useful.
Mr. Weaver, have you come just out of a sense of solidarity? Because as you said, you know these people have been through because you've been through it yourself. Do you see yourself here also as some sort of hopefully a mediator, a negotiator?
Both. You got it. You say it better than I can.
Can you talk about that? How do
Sure.
you feel mediate and negotiate?
Well, the mediation part is, I guess, mostly trying to educate people that are just taking orders. You know, the old, I'm just taking orders. That isn't going to cut it here. I don't care. You're just taking orders and want to come and cause a problem here, you're going to have a problem. The mediation, that's it.
Do you want to reach out to the federal officials in any way, or is it through
Oh,
us?
you're doing that for me. If they want to talk to me, I'm willing to talk to them right here. And I want a nice audience, and I'm not a bit scared to talk to them. We'll debate it.
How long will you stay here?
Till the next glacial age, if it's necessary. Maybe, I don't know. I don't like to stay in one place too long. I may decide to leave in 10, 15, 20 years.
Mr. Weaver, you've been to a lot of different, quote-unquote, hot spots, as it were, for lack of a better term. You said a little while ago at the beginning of your speech, you talked about, you asked the question, what makes people willing to be part of their life, willing to put their life on the line? What do you think the answer to that is? You've seen a lot of you, more than probably anyone else in this crowd right now. You've seen that more than anyone else. What do you think the answer to your own question is? Why are people willing to put their life on the line in these kinds of situations?
Because you get tired of being lied to. You get tired of being stolen from. You get tired of watching your loved ones die. I was shot in the back. That wasn't no fun. I don't want that. I don't like that either. You have to. Yeah, freedom. One word, freedom. But you get mad after a while. Get angry and you say enough's enough. And this tax thing. Who was the original tax protesters? Founding fathers, sure. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. And you know what? They were upset over 3%. Look at all the crap we're taking.
What do you hope will happen here? What's the ending you're hoping for?
What am I hoping for? I'm hoping for people to become educated, the U.S. Marshals to go home and take their family, maybe get a different job, sell cars or something. I shouldn't say that because I got friends that sell cars and they're really nice people. It's easy. The miracle would be a few people. I love y'all. My job is to educate people and support people that are willing to have the courage to stand up. They put themselves in a very tight position and very scary to most Americans. But you know what? It's like I said, they got angry, they overcome the fear, and that's what it's going to take for all of us. What I hope, the miracle I'm hoping for is that you'll go down to the IRS and tell them you are demanding them to show you the law. You know what it says about the filing your income tax? It says totally voluntary. And it's like I think Ed said before, or John, if you don't file, it's a misdemeanor. If you do file, they're going to hang you after dry if they can come back and say, oh, you skipped out on $10 there, buddy. And we know it was on purpose, and you're done. And they have ruined the lives of lots of innocent, nice folks if they, stole from them and they killed them and everything else. When is it going to stop?
Randy, you're in the state of New Hampshire, which has a motto, live free or die. It also has a constitution besides the United States Constitution. And that constitution says Ed Brown is allowed to present evidence. What happens when you go into a federal court and you lose your state rights?
Good question. No, I think these people are smart enough to figure that out for themselves. I don't have to answer that. I gotta shut this thing off. It keeps telling me my battery's going. And it's driving me nuts.
Another question. This has reached the United States Senate. On March 27th, there was a paper presented to the senators, about 30 pages long, because people have been asking their United States senators, is this a lawful tax or not? And I believe the Aaron Russo tape's now gone around the world. As this is finally getting to the United States Senate, so they're trying to answer that, and they had one of their attorneys answer all those 30 to 40 questions. Now that document's being challenged, including that attorney. How do you look at that particular document that's been presented to the United States Senate?
That's getting too legal for me. I'll leave that up to the rest of us.
Mind if I ask a follow-up to that question?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, more question for Ed, Mr. Weaver. Ed, do you believe it's possible to set a legal precedence in this matter so that you are cleared of all charges?
Not in the courts we have now.
Ask it again.
Do you believe it's possible in a court of law to set a legal precedence to clear you of all charges?
Sir, ladies and gentlemen, in this nation of 50 nations, there is no longer any lawful courts. Every court in this nation of 50 nations, separate countries unto themselves, are operating under a statutory law, which is now